A portrait of a godly man. A portrait of a godly man. Psalm 128, go ahead and find that. It's a song of degrees. Couldn't help but think as we were singing, we're marching to Zion, heading towards the beautiful city of God. It's very similar to what these psalms are expressing. That the song we sings about the spiritual journey as we are pilgrims heading towards the New Jerusalem. But in a very real way, these pilgrims were heading towards Jerusalem as they journeyed from their homelands up for the feast days. And these songs were their songs to accompany them along the journey. Psalm 128, this is number 9 in this mini-series and of our biggest series of Psalms. This is a Songs for the Ascent, number 9. Psalm 128, a song of degrees. Blessed is every one that feareth the Lord, that walketh in his ways. For thou shalt eat the labour of thine hands. Happy shalt thou be, and it shall be well with thee. Thy wife shall be as a fruitful vine by the sides of thine house, and thy children like olive plants round about thy table. Behold, that thus shall the man be blessed that feareth the Lord. The Lord shall bless thee out of Zion, and thou shalt see the good of Jerusalem all the days of thy life. Yea, thou shalt see thy children's children, and peace upon Israel. Hopefully you've read it. Hopefully this is not the first time that your eyes have fallen upon this particular psalm, and you're not just quickly now lingering upon the psalm, hoping to mine something and throw it out and acting like, oh, I've been thinking about this all week. Psalm 128. Any feedback? Any thoughts? Any verses that stand out? Mike Man Josh is on the...
Oh, thank you, Josh. Number 1 stands out to me. I look at Israel's journeys when they were in the wilderness of 40 years, how every time they disobeyed God, they had plagues and things happened to them. You know what I mean? They weren't happy. But when they feared the Lord, they had blessings. And it's like in our spiritual walk as well. When we don't fear God and do what we want to do and give into the flesh in that, our life is miserable. But when we give it to God and follow His statutes and His ways, we're blessed and happy.
Yeah,
like I am tonight to be here. Thank you.
It's true. Blessed is good. Blessed is good. Happy is the man. Any other feedbacks, thoughts, comments, observations, questions, queries? Wow, that was less than last week. And I really come out of lockdown slowly on a Wednesday night. Josh?
Yeah, this psalm I read probably when I first came back to God back to church in September 2014. I remember reading it in my bedroom, just contemplating my life and who I was going to marry, and just wanted to move on real quickly. And God just gave me this chapter and basically just told me, you know what, don't worry about all the temporal things of life. Just fear me and serve me, and I'll take care of everything else along the way. And I can testify today that God has done that. And I'm a man that tries to fear God every day, and I am blessed, I'm happy, and I do have peace.
Amen.
I still do have all the trials, but I tell you what, you just focus every day on fearing God, and He'll bring that woman or that man and your family. God does what He does best. But fear the Lord. So, no, I really enjoy that chapter.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
Good. We're going to tie that in a little bit, what you just said then, at the very, very end. Any other thoughts, comments, feedback? You guys are eager to get to prayer, are you? Maybe that's what it is. All right, well then, just turn that off, Josh, and we'll have a look at what we have here before us, Psalm 128. In studying this particular passage and looking at it, there was a song. I came across a song. I'd never heard the song before, and maybe some more educated people in here may have heard of it. It was an old folk song from about 1836, and it was called Home, Sweet Home. Now, we think of Home Sweet Home as the hymn, not the hymn. This was a folk song written by an American man, and then the music was written by an Englishman, and it was written about 200 years ago. And apparently, during the 1860s, when the American Civil War was taking place, the Union Army actually banned the singing of this particular song because they felt that it would encourage desertion in the armies, that they would desert and go back home when they would sing this folk song about home sweet home. And this is the lyrics to this particular song. It says, "Mid pleasures and palaces though we may roam, be it ever so humble, there's no place like home. A charm from the sky seems to hallow us there, which seek through the world is ne'er met elsewhere. Home, home, sweet, sweet home, there's no place like home. There's no place like home," says the chorus. The second verse says, "An exile from home, splendor dazzles in vain. Oh, give me my lowly thatched cottage again. The birds singing gaily that come at my call, give me them with the peace of mind dearer than all. Home, home, sweet home, there's no place like home, there's no place like home." And they would sing that song. And that song was popular during the 1800s, and it seems to have lost. You can look it up and find it on YouTube, and some people singing it, an old song that they'd sing. But they'd sing it in the memories of home. Doesn't matter where you roam and where you go and the pleasures and the palaces of this life, there's no place like home, so says the song. And you can't help but look at this and think maybe that's what Psalms 128 is picturing for us. A home, a house. When I look at this particular verse number 3 stands out to me. "Thy wife shall be a fruitful vine by the sides of thine house, thy children like olive plants round about thy table." I preached from this passage once before. I have notes on this particular chapter, and it was from the 7th of October 2012, which was the last night the Harrises were here before they moved to Queensland way back in 2012, and Pastor Harris has passed away by that stage. And I used this passage. I don't know why I was doing the preaching that night. I think Pastor Thrush was away out of town. I think he was actually in America maybe. I'm not sure actually. I'm not sure the details of where he was. But they left there on the 7th of October was their last service, 2012. And I used this verse because that to me was summed up Pastor Harris. It was the verse that I best sum up the life of Pastor Harris, was that he had, his family was a wife that was as a fruitful vine by the sides of his house, and his children were like olive plants round about his table. It speaks of eloquence or opulence. That's what I see when I see this verse. And I find that verse to be, it's a beautiful verse. Whether you fully understand what does it mean that your wife is a fruitful vine and your children are olive plants, what does it actually mean? I'm not sure I know exactly, but I know the beauty of what is being conveyed, because there is a beauty to that. It just seems like it's a beautiful picture. Now for me, this is what I picture. I picture a Tuscan home there in Tuscany or Italy, and a Tuscan kind of home by the Mediterranean, and you come in, a luscious, big, opulent house, and there's the cobbled stonework that is laid out all the way up to the house, immaculate grass, mown grass on either side, and very neat all the way down. The hedges are neat as it goes down the driveway. You come to the front of the house, this is in my mind, there might be columns or pillars, and there's ivy or there's vines that are wrapped around the columns, and the terracotta colors and the earthy tones of the house stand out. And there by the door, the big oak doors, in my mind I see big terracotta pot plants, and in those pot plants are trees or shrubs or bushes, not just little flowers, but kind of nicely sculpted and molded right by the door, welcoming guests. And as you kind of come into this house, this Tuscan home in the Mediterranean with vines and olive plants, in my mind, it screams opulence. It screams to me luxury. It screams to me a wow factor, like this is nice. it's timeless. It's not something that's trendy. We've been driving around the suburbs, and you drive around, there's very trendy houses, and it's very trendy in the last 5 years to paint your house different shades of grey. I think that's hideous. I think it's terrible. It just looks dull, and it looks like it's a fad. And already, after 5 years of people painting their house light grey and the roof dark grey and the fence another shade of grey, that it just, 5 years now, it looks dated. But this Tuscan home, with its hedges and its grass and its earthy tones and its terracotta pots, there's something timeless about it, that it always looks luxurious. It always looks opulent. It always looks in season and what people desire. There's a niceness to it. And that's in my mind what I picture. And I think that's what this psalm, even though it's not Mediterranean in that particular respect, it's a bit further around with the Middle East or the Near East. But how do you get there? Because that's what a family should be. And more particularly, it's directed towards the men. Men, this is what your homes ought to be. That there is this opulence and this loveliness about it. Blessed is every one. I know it says every one that feareth the Lord, that walketh in his ways. They are blessed. They're blessed people who walk with God, who serve God. But it says, thou shalt eat the labour of thine hands. Happy shalt thou be, and it shall be well with thee. And then it says in verse 4, behold, that thus shall the man be blessed that feareth the Lord. How do you get this opulent, luxurious, lovely, desirable home that is pictured here in the Scriptures? Well, he tells us, this man who is blessed is because he feareth the Lord. He walks with God. He's a man who fears God and fulfills his commandments. And as a result of this fear of God, which the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, wisdom is the correct application of knowledge, there's some engaging and doing what God has said to do. So living the life that God has said, not just talking about it, but actually engaging and doing it. He says, this person is blessed. This person, he says in verse 2, for thou shalt eat the labour of thine hands, happy shalt thou be, and it shall be well with thee. Happy. He walks into his home, and he's happy to go to his home. He's happy. Josh said this the other day. I never heard this comment, but Josh remembers Pastor Harris saying that one of his favourite places in all the world was his home. Is that the comment that you made? He says one of his favourite places to be was his home. He wanted to go home to his wife and to his children. He loved being at his home. Now, where did that come from? Did that magically appear? No, it was a man that feared God, and he, it says here in verse 2, he ate the labour of his hands. That opulence that he enjoyed was a result of his labours as a father and as a husband, and it produced an opulence in his home when he went there. He ate the labour of his hands. He was happy. Happy shalt thou be, and it shall be well with thee. And he might not have lived in that Tuscan mansion that I described, but he went home to just as opulent and just as luxurious of a home as that Tuscan mansion. Now imagine this. In that Tuscan mansion that I poorly tried to paint in your minds just a moment ago, imagine that driveway that leads up to that front door. And out comes the master of the house, the husband, the father. He now comes out. He's standing right in the middle, and the painter comes along, and he's going to paint this picture. And it's not just going to be of the home, it's going to be of this man who is the man of the home. And so the painter is painting a portrait, and this portrait is of the man, and the portrait next to the man is his wife. And around about this man and his wife are children, maybe the family dog at their feet. And here they are all standing in the middle of this cobblestone driveway with this Tuscan mansion in the back, immaculately kept grounds, with the olive plants by the door, welcoming in guests. And here they are. And the painter is painting this image. And you can't help but look at this image and say, wow, what a beautiful picture this is. What a beautiful family and a beautiful setting and a beautiful home. And anyone sees the picture would say, I desire this. I desire to be in this picture, to be the man in the center, and to be the one with the wife by his side and the children round about him in a wonderful, beautiful setting. And you look at the portrait and you can't help but say, what a godly man. That's what Psalms 128 is painting. This portrait of a godly man and his home. It goes on, and you might see the progression here. And I'll very quickly make mention of the progression to you before I make my final point. The line of development is the God-fearing man. Isn't this interesting here? He starts out with the man who fears God. Then he talks about his family, his wife, and his children round about his table. And then you have in verses 4 and 5, then you have, or verse 5, the Lord shall bless thee out of Zion. Thou shalt see the good of Jerusalem all the days. He's talking about a city. Isn't that what they were talking about in the chapter before? What did we say cities are made up of? Last week. Buildings or homes, they're just multiple houses, aren't they, is what a city is. And so he's saying, how is the peace of Jerusalem going to come about? Well, it comes about by godly men being godly and fearing God, which then flows on to their wife and their children round about them. And then this godly home then extends to a city. Now, in our world at the moment, we have cities in an uproar. Do you know there is one defining key element in all of these uproars that is a common denominator between them all? Broken homes. And they are broken cities because there are first broken homes, and those homes have no fathers. No, they have fathers, they have no dads. So everyone has a father, not everyone has a dad. These families don't have dads, and the homes are broken, and then it flows on because their home is broken, the cities are broken. And they're all trying to think, how can we fix the cities? Well, he says here, you want peace in Zion, peace in Jerusalem, in the city? Well, you need good, strong families. Well, how do you get good, strong, wholesome families? Well, it comes again to the responsibility on the shoulders of the man. The godly men produce godly families, and godly families produce godly cities. That's what the progression there is. And then that progression, that heritage, is then even passed on to the children's children. He sets in motion, this godly man sets in motion things that are picked up from the children, and the children's children are receiving the inheritance and the blessings from a godly man who set things in motion. And Bruce Harris, that was the point I was making on that particular night, is that the Harrises might have been leaving and Pastor Harris may have already gone on to glory, but he set in motion now for his wife who continued it on and his children who are continuing on. And if he was alive today, he'd see that he's got grandchildren now that are godly grandchildren fearing God. He set in motion a progression to the children's children, and peace in now multiple homes. From those children that came from a peaceful home have now gone out and are producing more peaceful homes. And the progression of godliness goes on by the fear of one man who feared God. And it flows on to a city. That's the progression of what is being said here in Psalm 128. So when you see that picture, it might not be a Tuscan mansion with that man and his wife and his children around about him in this portrait that is being painted. But let me ask you this, as you put that picture back in your mind, you put that painting, there is hung this massive painting. Wherever house it may be, you go in their house, massive painting, Tuscan background, house, man, wife, children. Let me ask you this, you look at that and think, that's beautiful. In Psalm 128, it's painting this godly, amazing picture. Now, do you see a mirror or do you see a portrait? See, what do you mean by that? Well, when you look at that, are you looking at a mirror? Are you in that? Are you looking at a reflection of your life and wife and children and home? Or is it just a portrait of somebody else's life and somebody else's wife and somebody else's children and somebody else's home? Because I don't want it. This is the conviction of my own heart today studying this. I look at this and I think, man, that's beautiful. That's a lovely picture and a lovely home, and it's painted and it's in my mind, and I think, that's luxurious and it's opulent. A home, a godly home. I think, man, I don't want that to be the portrait of somebody else that I'm looking at. I want it to be a mirror, and I want it to be reflecting and say, I can see that God has done this in my house, in my home. And that's why I come back to what Josh said. Because without him realizing it, you know what he was testifying to just a few moments ago? He's saying, I read this and I don't see a portrait, I see a mirror. I see that God has done this in my life. And I read it and I think, I see a portrait. And Josh sees a mirror. I'm convicted by that. And I want to ask you, men particularly, because it's aimed towards men, or it says, blessed is everyone that feareth the Lord. Let me ask you this. When you look at this, if it was a painting, if it was framed, it's framed, do you see a portrait of someone else's life? Or do you see a mirror of what God has done in your life? I can't answer that question for you. I can only ask it for you and for you to answer it within your own heart honestly before God. Because I know what I want. I don't want to look in a portrait. I want to look in a mirror and realize, man, this is what God has done for me. He's blessed me in this particular setting, and my home is like it's a Tuscan mansion that people are desirous of, not because I live in a Tuscan mansion, but because my home is a Tuscan mansion of spirituality. You know what I mean? You know the point I'm trying to get across. And so I ask you, is Psalm 128 to you a portrait or a mirror? May it be mirrors. If it's a portrait, ask God, beg God, God, I need to make this a mirror. This is what we need to be, is mirrors, not portraits, in Psalm 128. Let's close in prayer and then we'll go to prayer. God, it's a wonderful psalm. There's a lot of meaning here, and there's a depth there, God, that, Lord, I pray that we could plumb it and learn it. May you burn it in our hearts. May our homes, Lord, this is not just something for someone else. This doesn't just have to be someone else's life that we look at. God, you promised this life to all those who fear you. With wisdom, walk and follow in your footsteps and do the things that you've commanded your children to do. And Lord, it can become a mirror, not just a portrait. Father, work in the hearts tonight of the people, and may this little simple truth burn in our hearts, and may we strive to show forth your glory in our homes, first of all in our lives and in our families. And God, you know our city and our suburbs need these families. Father, would you bless your word tonight? In Jesus' name, amen. Would you break into groups, and you've got prayer cards and you've got there. When you are finished and you pray with someone,